Hi creative friends, it's Sharon Brandon and welcome to my studio. I'm thrilled to be sharing this Tim Holtz vignette display panel project with you today that I created for the Sizzix Chapter 1 release. This panel was created with the Stacked Hearts dies and a sentiment from the Bold Text 1 dies and a bunch of mixed media techniques which I'll show you in this video. The first thing that we're going to do is just take a look at some of the supplies that we'll be using to create this project today. So the first thing I used is this vignette display panel. You'll notice that mine has Christmas packaging, but this panel is now part of the Everyday Idea-ology line. It's a 9x9 wood panel, and the project that we're going to make is very similar to this sample on the front, where there are 6 squares by 6 squares, and the squares that we'll be cutting are 1.5 inches each. The other things that we'll use are these Sizzix stacked hearts dies, and you'll see that there are 5 different sizes of hearts, and there are 5 of each heart in the pack, so there are 25 dies altogether, which will help us get our project done a little bit quicker. The other thing that we'll be using is this Sizzix Bold Text 1 set. This has tons of great sentiments, and we'll be using the Love You sentiment from this set. And for the papers for the background of the project, I selected these Tim Holtz Idea-ology backdrops papers. This is the Backdrops 2 package, and you can see on the back of the packaging, it shows you the front and the back side of each paper. They all have a different side. For the project that I've done today, I used a pack of the Backdrops 2 and also some papers from the Backdrops 1 set. And I keep all of my papers together in one bin by color in my studio. It's just easier for me when creating. So I'll go ahead and pick out some of the papers that we'll use for this project today. I'm recreating the same project that I made before, so I'm picking out the same colors, and we have a pink and orange, a yellow, a green, a blue, and a paper with lots of text. And I picked these colors to kind of mimic the colors of candy hearts for Valentine's Day when I first made this project. The next thing that we'll do is go ahead and cut the papers. And as I mentioned, this is a 9x9 panel, so our squares that we're going to be cutting will be 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you is when I cut these squares, we're going to need 32 squares for our project. The panel would usually take 36 squares, but 4 of those squares are going to be taken up by that love you sentiment. So we'll cut our squares. When I was cutting these up, I cut about 10 of each square, and I know that's more than I need, but what I like to do with these squares is have a variety of patterns. So you'll notice that some of the squares, once you get them cut down really small, some of them will just have like a big piece of text, some will have numbers, some will have letters. So I wanted a variety of patterns on each square of each color. And when I'm done, you'll see that I have them cut in this muffin tin right here. I do have quite a variety to pick from. So the first thing that I'm going to do, you'll see I have one square already that's not exactly the same size as the other, so I'll take that one out of the way. The first thing that I'm going to do is just take out 5 of the squares. Like I said, there are 5 hearts of each size, so we can cut 5 heart squares each time. And I'm just going to use some of this tape that I use when I'm die cutting. And what I'll do, it's not super sticky, so I actually managed to use this same pieces of tape I put on my first squares all the way through the cutting process of this project. And I'm not pressing the tape down super hard, but it does pull off relatively easily. I'm putting the tape onto the hearts, I'm lining them up in the center of the square and cutting them out. Another thing I did forget to mention, if you notice in the bottom right of the screen, you'll see a bigger black square where the love you's cut out. So that square will be 3 inches by 3 inches, and just center the love you and cut that out. And I use the black craft stock paper. And I'll go ahead and finish cutting out the rest of my squares here. And when I'm done, I'll take the hearts and just give each heart a little bit of inking with black soot distress ink. It does take a few minutes to ink up all of these hearts, but it's certainly worth it. It does make the hearts pop off of your project. So we'll go ahead and just take a minute and ink all of these up. And once I'm done inking, I'll separate my hearts over on the glass, the white part of my glass mat, and then the cutout parts over on the top. And I put the cutout parts in rainbow order because what I'm going to attempt to do when I'm putting this project together is use one of each color in each row. Another thing I did when I first made this project is I cut a piece of cardstock to 9 by 9, the same size as this panel, and I laid out all of my hearts and all of my insides on the panel, and then I just moved them over one by one. So you can certainly do that. But today I'm just going to go for it and glue them on, and we'll see what happens. But I think it'll be fine. So go ahead and add just a bit of that Distress Collage medium. This is the matte medium, so it won't be shiny. And I have a dedicated brush that I use whenever I use collage medium. So it's just this one dirty brush. You can certainly use collage brushes. And you want to make sure when you're not using it that you either wrap the brush in a baby wipe, or when you're finished using it, just to make sure that you wash that collage medium or rinse it out right away, because it will dry and harden up, and then you won't really get much more use out of that brush. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep adding in the hearts. And what I did with this particular project, so I didn't map them out beforehand. I'm going ahead and gluing in like the first two rows, and I'm working horizontally. And once I get those rows kind of straightened out, I'm going to start working vertically and make the space for my love you. And what that's going to do is just try to keep everything centered on the project. And you'll see when I get down to the love you, some of my squares must have been a little off, because the love you, what I did was just overlap it. And you'll see right there, I'm just lifting it up and overlapping it to make it look like a straight line. So I'll go ahead and see what colors I already have, and then continue adding the hearts around the love you, and then just finishing off the piece. So now the piece is done, and I'll just move these little pieces out of the way, and we'll continue on with the project. I'll save those for something else. I'll glue them in a journal or on a tag or even to a card. And what I'm going to do here is just fill in a couple of these empty spots with some Distress Collage medium and start adding my hearts in. So the same thing as I did before, where I don't want to put all hearts of the same color next to each other. I'm just kind of looking at what I have in my pile, looking at what I have filled in, and then just working my way around from there. So I'll go ahead and keep adding the hearts in, putting them into the empty spots, and then going over the whole piece with some more collage medium. And then the very last thing that we're going to do is we'll fill in that love you. So for that part of the piece, just to match the paper that I've already had, I used some off-white cardstock and filled in the love you, and doing the same thing, just putting in the collage medium, putting in my pieces, and then going over the pieces that I put in with some more collage medium. And then I'm just going to make sure the entire piece is covered with the collage medium. That's what's going to help for the next part of the process when we add in the distress crown. And once that's done, I will let the piece dry for a little bit. I let mine dry for about an hour and went away to do something, but your piece should certainly dry much quicker than that. I did notice there were a few little bits where some paper was hanging off, so you can see I took a craft knife, cut them off, and I'm using a sanding block just to make sure that all the edges are nice and smooth. And you'll see there's a little white core of the cardstock, but we'll cover that up when we add the distress crown and other things, and we won't see that white anymore. But let me just make sure that it's nice and smooth, and then we'll get to the coloring. So now I'm starting with the distress crowns. I'm using a hickory smoke distress crown. It's like a darker gray, to just go in and go around the hearts and give them all a bit of an outline. So you'll see that. And I'm going to outline every single heart, and I'll just take my time and make sure everything's filled in. It's kind of like adding some grout to tile. I just want to make sure that everything is outlined and that you can see each individual piece. So I'll take a few minutes and get that done. And I am going out to the edges as well, as you can see. So once that's done, we'll go ahead and start blending the crown that we added to the panel. So I have a damp baby wipe over to the side, and I'm just putting my finger onto the damp baby wipe and picking up some of the moisture and using it to blend in the crown around the entire panel. And if you get some parts where you've added too much crown or it's covering up stuff, Just take the baby wipe and wipe it off, and you'll see you can keep going back in. If you took too much off and you're not used to the process, you can go back in and you'll get comfortable after you do it a couple of times. But I'll just go ahead and blend everything in until each of the squares is nice and smooth, and then we're ready to add some color into the piece. So for this piece, I picked some brighter colors than the original piece I made. The one I made originally had some more muted colors, but I wanted to try it and see how it would look with something a little more bright. So I'm taking the mustard seed, the yellow crayon, and just going over the hearts that have yellow in them. And you can see I'm not coloring in the entire heart, but I'm just taking the crown and adding some highlights maybe to the top, to the sides of the heart. And I'll also do the same thing in the yellow squares. So I'll just go over, add a little bit of crayon in, blending as I go. And that just lets me know if I need to add a little bit more. You can keep building these layers as long as you want to, or if you want to add multiple colors in a square, feel free to do that as well. I'm just making it simple today and adding one color at a time. You'll also notice I turn my panel around as I'm working. It just gives me a better perspective and lets me see like where I might need some darker color or where something needs a little more contrast. So I will just go ahead and take the remaining colors and do the same process until I have all of my squares filled in with color. You see as I'm adding each color, the hearts start to pop more and more. So now that we're done coloring in all of the hearts, I wanted to add a little bit more boldness to this panel. So I'm using a Stabilo All pencil. If you haven't used this before, it's a water-soluble pencil. I use it a lot in my art journaling, and for this project, I like to make sure that it has a really sharp point. So what I'm going to do with it is just take the pencil, outline each of the hearts. As you can see, I'm wiping some off with the baby wipe. This one blends a lot more, blends out a lot more than the Distress Crayon. So, you just want to be careful. If you start smudging it a lot, you'll get it all over, but you can wipe it off with a baby wipe. So again, the same thing as with the crayons. If you haven't worked with this pencil before, um, don't be afraid to use it. You can definitely wipe it off, and after a little bit of practice, you'll get the hang of it. I'm taking this pencil, and like I said, I like it to be really sharp, so I stopped and sharpened it a few times in between working with it, and just took my time and outlined each and every one of the hearts, and did the same process with the baby wipe where I was blending it, taking some off with the baby wipe if I needed to. If you take off some of the color from the crayon, you can always add that back in as well. So I'll just finish that up. The last thing that we're going to do for this project is just to add that colorful splatter, which I really think makes the project fun and looks, loose and messy and gives it the mixed media style. So I'll color some of the Distress Crayon onto my white part of my glass mat so I can see it. And if you notice, I'm coloring it kind of heavy, so just pressing a little harder on the crown to get some of that pigment out, giving it some water spray from my Distress sprayer. And then I'm going to take a paintbrush, it's just a Ranger paintbrush, and mix up the pigment with the water, and it makes kind of like a sort of a creamy, like painty paste, I would say. And then I'm going to take that paste and splatter it over my project. One thing I almost forgot to do, it's kind of important, I cut a square that is the same size as the love you. So I'm going to take that square and just place it over my love you so I don't get splatter all over it. And now we're ready to continue with the splatter. So I'll go ahead and add some blue. I might even need a little bit more pigment here. So I'm going to go ahead and just scribble a little bit more pigment. You can see this one, I've scribbled it out. There's like a lot of little bits, but once I spray the water and mix that back in, it'll create the paste again. So I'll go ahead and splatter each of the colors. And what I did do when I was doing the splatter is I did go ahead and rinse my paintbrush in between each color, just so I wasn't mixing the colors up. And I'll just add splatter to the whole entire panel. I'm going to go ahead and remove that scrap paper, and I'm taking the hickory smoke crayon again and just outlining a little bit of the edges of the love you letters. I just wanted those to pop as well, and they looked very plain compared to the rest of the piece. So I just took a little bit of that hickory smoke crayon, rubbed it in, spread it around with the baby wipe again, and we're pretty much done with our panel now. So I'm going to wipe off just this excess pigment that I have on my glass mat, and here's a closer look. You can see all of that detail that we added and the splatter. And I think recreating this piece, I'll just bring in the other piece, the original piece that I made. I think we did a pretty good replication of it today, and I hope you have success replicating this at home. If you like this video, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up, and I hope to share more videos with you soon. Thanks so much for watching.